All right, guys. We are officially connected everywhere again. I used to do it this way with like two phones and the computer that was attached to a few different things. So we're live in like 4 or 5 places at the same time. Last couple of months, or last longer than a couple of months, I just haven't had the second phone, but just bought myself a new phone. So now we've got Instagram, we've got TikTok, and we've got Facebook and YouTube. So I'm stoked for this. And guys, we are going to be talking today about 3 mistakes you're making in your strength training. So if you're here, make sure you stick around. It's going to be a good one. Appreciate you guys all tuning in, just checking in, seeing what we got. All right, we got a few people tuning in. Awesome. Hope you guys are all having a fantastic day. And we're going to get into it right away. We're going to talk about 3 mistakes you're making in your strength training. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 podcast for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I am your host, Kenny Dussault, and today we're talking about 3 mistakes you are making in your strength training. So, guys, thankfully, we are living in a world where more and more people are starting to understand that strength training is an important part of being a good athlete. And it feels crazy to even say that because it's so obvious to me. But this has been a problem for a very, very long time. And we've had, I have athletes still to this day tell me that, oh, lifting weights makes you slow, or, oh, like just do more skills training. You don't need to get strong. Like, oh, being strong isn't good for some fucking stupid reason. But thankfully, more and more people are starting to see it. But with that being said, strength training in the world of combat sports is, I don't want to go as far as saying a new thing, but it's not as commonplace as we would maybe like it to be. So what I want to do in this episode is I want to talk to you guys about 3 mistakes I see athletes making when it comes to strength training for their sport. So first off, what are the benefits of strength training? Why do you need to be doing it? Number 1, plain and simple, if you're stronger than your opponent, then you guys lock up, you're going to have the advantage. Right. Number 2, if every movement you make takes some level of strength. Yeah, just moving around doesn't take a lot, it takes a little. And so if you're stronger, every movement you make takes less energy. And if every movement you make takes less energy, it's less taxing on your cardio by being stronger. Now, the mistake a lot of people make with that, this isn't one of the 3, but it just kind of came to me as I was talking, is people assume that when I say getting strong, I mean just packing on muscle, right? They think that I'm saying you should look like one of those guys stepping on the Mr. Olympia stage every year. And that's just not the case, right? You can build strength without packing on a lot of muscle. In fact, it's actually a lot harder to pack on a lot of muscle than a lot of people think. The goal is to make the muscle you have work as effectively as possible so that you can get the most out of it. Now, does this mean you won't gain any muscle whatsoever? No, you might gain a little bit of muscle, but at the same time, you're probably going to lose a little bit of fat. And if you put on a little bit of muscle and you're in good shape and you're strong, fast, powerful, likely it's not going to be so much that you're not going to be able to move, that you're not going to be able to get down to your weight class. And if it does turn into that much where you can't get down to your weight class, then guess what? You should probably be going up in weight anyway, right? So make sure that you're not mistaking you need to get stronger with you need to become a bodybuilder, because it is not at all the same thing. But I kind of lost where I was going with that point, if I'm totally honest. But the main piece is that you need to make sure that you are consistently strength training. The next thing that strength training is going to do, I found it, is decrease your risk of injury. Now, if you learn to lift the right way, the goal isn't to just, again, get enormous, or the goal is not to just lift the most weight possible. The goal is to keep your body functioning at a high level. And if you don't have to, if you're not able to function at a high level and your joints and muscles aren't strong, then what's going to happen is you're going to put yourself in a position where when your body takes impact, it's a fight, that's going to happen. Then when your body takes impact, you're more likely to get hurt, right? You throw a punch, it lands wrong, your shoulder strains. If your shoulder's not as strong, damage can occur faster. So reduce your risk of injury. The next thing is it's going to allow you to hit harder. Power behind your punches comes from strength. The more strength you have, the more ability you have to put force behind your movements. The more ability you have to put force behind your movements coming from the strength, the more ability you have to train that force to be able to output it quickly, which translates into power. Right? So that's just a few reasons why you need to be strength training. So now let's get into the mistakes. Mistake number one, skipping it. This is something that I still see so often. Athletes will tell me, I know I need to get stronger. I know I need that proper strength and conditioning. That's going to take my game to the next level. They start a program, and then as they start their program, they're like, I can't hit my strength work this week because I have to do more skill sessions. And the problem with that, number one, yes, of course, your skills are important. Of course, you need to train your skills hard. You need to push yourself in all of that. Do not take this to mean that I am saying that your skills are not important or you shouldn't train them. But the problem with that is when you're coming to a coach like me, or when you're seeing that deficit in your game, that you're getting thrown around or you're just getting overpowered, more skill isn't going to magically make someone not able to overpower you, right? That comes down to the strength. So even though that strength training might be taking away time from your skills training, and that was in air quotes for anybody listening back to the podcast replay, it's going to be more beneficial. Not more beneficial than having skills overall, but if you are stronger, then you're going to avoid those things like getting, right? Now, does skill play a part in that? Of course, but it's not everything. So if you have a good skill set, continue to train it, but by adding in those 2 to 3 strength sessions per week, you're going to be able to mitigate some of those strength disadvantages that you might currently have in your fights, right? And I understand the impulse in your head. You're like, the more skill work I do, the better skill I'm going to have, the more likely I am to win the fight. But if you're not strong and someone's able to just grab you and hold you and throw you around, then your skill set's good, their skill set's good, but they have the strength advantage. They're probably going to win that fight, right? So it's not about one or the other. It's about balancing both together. Now, the second mistake that people make is doing too many reps with their strength training. So this is one problem I see far, far, far too often is athletes come to me and they're like, yeah, I started strength training, and I ask them what they do. And they're like, well, usually I'll hit like 3 or 4 exercises. I do, 4 or 5 sets. And then I finish off with a burnout set of 50 or a burnout set of 100. Or, I just make sure that I do 4 sets and I go all the way to failure with each and every set. Now, again, I understand the mindset. I understand how you get there. The way a lot of people are thinking, right? They're like, well, if I do more reps of this strength work, then I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get better results. But the problem with thinking that way, guys, is a couple of things. Number one, if you are just burning the shit out of your legs or your arms or your back or whatever with the strength training, quote unquote, strength training that you're doing by doing burnout sets or sets to failure with everything, then you're not really getting stronger. You're just exhausting the fuck out of your legs or exhausting the fuck out of your arms or your back or whatever it is, right? So you're breaking it down so much that it's not able to adequately recover. And if it's not able to adequately recover, then you're not going to get the benefit that you're looking for coming back into the sport. So that's number one, making sure that you're giving yourself the time to adequately recover. Number two is if you're going to absolute burnout or failure with every set you do, you're paying no attention to the technique. And that's going to lead into problem number 3, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, when you're not, like, the reason paying attention to the technique is so important is because your goal as an athlete isn't to just lift the most weight. Your goal as an athlete is to perform the best in your sport, right? So you need to get stronger, but you also need to combine that with being able to actually perform in the sport. And if you're not letting yourself recover, then you're not getting that performance benefit that you're looking for. Now, the other part when it comes to doing too many reps, when you're just, burning yourself out with everything you do, is plain and simple, as you break the body down, you're putting yourself in more risk of injuries. So you know how I said getting stronger is going to decrease risk of injury? But if you don't use the weights properly and you're just trying to burn your body out with them every single day, then you're not decreasing the risk, you're actually increasing the risk. So when you're working on strength, focus on 3 to 4 sets of each exercise you do, sticking to full body strength training sessions 2 to 3 times a week. You're going to go 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 8 reps. And that's a good starting point. And then figure out what weight makes sense based off of how the reps are feeling, right? If you start realizing like, okay, I hit a set of 6 with this exercise, but it didn't feel hard at all. I feel like I could have done 15. The weight's too light, move it up, right? If you hit that set of 6 and you're like, oh my God, there's no way I could have done one more, it's probably a little too heavy. You got to bring it down a little bit. Usually where I like to start athletes is think about it at about an 8 out of 10 intensity, right? So it's like, that means when you hit that set of 6, you should be able to do about 2 more before you're like, okay, my technique would have fallen off there. Now, the third and final thing that we are talking about when it comes to the mistakes you're making in your strength training is focusing on the weight on the bar over the technique. Now, yet again, I've said it a couple times, but I understand the mindset. I understand how you get there. You're in that position where you're like, hey, I've got to continue to make progress, right? And in your mind, progress means I lifted this much last week. I'm going to lift this much next week. And the problem with thinking that way, not that we don't want to increase the weight that you have on the bar, but the problem with thinking that way is that, again, you're not a power lifter. Your goal is not squat to the most weight. Your goal is perform in the sport on the night that you actually have to compete, right? We can all agree on that. So the focus shouldn't be powerlifting numbers, trying to increase the amount of weight on the bar every single week. The focus needs to be the technique, right? When you're doing a squat, focusing on sitting back through your hips, engaging your hamstrings, pausing at the bottom and being explosive on the way up. Making sure that you're keeping the lifts technical and focusing on doing it right is going to build the right muscle groups that are going to translate to the more efficient movement you're looking for, which in turn is going to put the best version of you into the sport every time you compete. Now, when it comes to this last piece as well, the more weight over just focusing on improving technique, the other part of that too is, like I said, the goal is not to just lift the most weight, but then there are going to be certain phases where the goal is not even to lift the heavy weight for you, right? Weights are a tool that we use to help athletes perform. And at certain times, the goal is going to be to lift lighter weights, but lift them more explosively. So if your only thought is increase the weight, increase the weight, increase the weight, increase the weight, you're never going to get the power benefits that we can get from weights because you're always focused on just lifting the heaviest thing possible. But if you take that weight down and you focus on moving it more explosively and you go through an entire phase of training where the weights are lighter but more explosive, you're going to get more explosive, improve the proper movement patterns you're looking for, and in turn, put a stronger, faster, more explosive athlete back into every fight you have, which ultimately should be the goal. So guys, just a quick summary. Mistake number 1 that you guys are making when it comes to your strength training is skipping it. 2 to 3 days a week, full body sessions, 2 to 3, I'd say 2 lower body, 2 upper body exercises minimum, 3 to 4 sets, 6 to 8 reps. Keep it consistent in your week and you're going to reap massive benefits. Fit it around your skills training. Don't neglect it. Number 2 is doing too many reps. If you're always just focused on how burning your legs out, you're not improving your ability to move explosively because your legs are dying. Second, you're putting yourself at higher risks of injury because you're just breaking down the muscle tissue so much that it's not recovering. And third, you're not really even getting stronger. You're just beating your body into the ground, like I was saying. Now, the third one is focusing too much on weight and not enough on technique. Now, the reason this is so important is because you're not a power lifter. Your goal is not to lift the heaviest weight possible. Your goal is to improve the movement patterns, the strength in certain areas and different positions to actually translate into competition on the night you need it. So guys, that is it. That is all. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I appreciate you, and I will catch you on the next episode.